LuciDPIXUL, and I am very pleased to bring you the art of Big Hero 6, a film that took me by surprise, and reading the book took me by surprise even further, because I did not realize the amount of research that went into producing this film. Very unique. I think that's one of the things that really stood out to me about this particular project was the amount of research that went into it. So right off the bat, one of the things that they're exploring here is their artistic exploration. When I worked on the Disney show myself, one of the common attributes of the directors and the artists that worked there was their fascination with experimentation and exploration of past artistic styles from posters, from other movies, from different artists, and finding ways to integrate this artistic style into, or at least influencing their own projects with these different artistic styles. So you can see as we start to flip through, almost right away, we're introduced as a first impression, because I'm always talking about first impressions, all of these different experimental artistic styles. I've seen a lot of this kind of stuff at Disney as well. Particularly, I remember at one point, one of the teams were researching the updated version of Mickey Mouse, the Mickey Mouse show. Now, once we get into San Fransokyo, I didn't realize that's what it was called, and it's kind of self-explanatory at the same time. There was a lot of research that went into the development. They essentially designed a city, the aesthetic of a city that had to not only be familiar in certain different ways, but had to be able to function narratively and emotionally with the film itself. And one of the things here, I'm going to zoom in because I want you to see the details here. That's pretty cool. If you look over here, this is what they're explaining in this particular section over here was how they wanted to take recognizable architecture, but then simplify it in a way that functioned with more simplified characters. Whereas if they had this incredibly high density of detail, as you can see, this is more photorealistic density of detail, it clashes with more animated characters. So what they did was simplify and offset things as well. Offset the shingles, offset the slats of wood here, to give it a little bit more of a handmade, organic feel to it. Now, being called San Fransokyo obviously means that this was influenced by and designed based around Tokyo and San Francisco. And one of the things they really had to brainstorm quite a bit was how to create a city that captured the essence of both of those places and fit within the narrative of it. So you can see over here we have this heavy density, this kind of very Tokyo-esque type of heavy density of a city over here on the side. Now, one of the things that really informed this, that plays into this design aesthetic, was a backstory. They did a lot of that in this film. They informed themselves by creating this fictional history to inform the design itself, imagining that the earthquake in 1906 that destroyed a lot of San Francisco had to be rebuilt, and that Japanese engineers helped to rebuild San Fransokyo, I always mix it up, to have this new mixed aesthetic visually. Here's the nightscape type of thing. Again, some very exploratory type of art styles that all help to fit in to the final vision. Beautiful stuff too, absolutely beautiful stuff. Some more experimental art. I love this, how the artist captured, it's very iconic in San Francisco. I've never been, but from what I've seen, from advertising and films and stuff like that, is beautiful sunsets. Because they have that very hilly landscape, you get these beautiful sunsets that hit off the top of the buildings that create this nice gloomy lighting. Great, fantastic for photography, I might add. Photographers would love this kind of stuff, as I'm sure they do. Now, one of the sweet spots visually that they ended up falling on is they kind of had to figure out what to steal from both different environments. And one of the things they started to fall on that really worked was capturing a lot of the iconic design architecture from San Francisco, namely like the hills, the different iconic rooftops that they have over here, but mixing it with the colors of Tokyo and the density of Tokyo as well. And this is where they started to find their voice artistically. If you've seen my review for The Incredibles 2 by Brad Bird, one of the things that I love about Brad Bird is how he researches advertising, poster art, all that kind of stuff through the ages. And there's a book that I mentioned is called The Art of Mondo. Brad Bird took part in that particular book, which is a book that you can buy online right now that researches exactly that. And what they were doing here is referencing poster art and all that kind of stuff and advertising from these two different locations, but merging them together to try to find a design language for their own unique poster art to help flesh out the iconography and the design and color language of these two different locations, where you can see them over here. And there's here different type of bits of advertising as well, posters, labels for different types of things. In a way that was informative, it helped to capture the essence, but didn't draw too much attention to itself. And they were talking here how certain types of visual language is too small to be seen on the big screen. It kind of gets lost. So they were trying to find these scales and these colors that could pop and catch your eye and help to capture this mood and this environment from a bit of a distance at a glance while you're passing through the environment, kind of picking up on things subliminally. This is a very important lesson. And this is something that my sister taught me when it came to music, because she's been a singer for years and she's played in bands, quite a few. And one of the things she spoke about was the balance of a band. That you have different instruments, you have different musicians and vocalists and stuff. My sister was usually the vocalist. And the difference between an amateur and a professional artist, and the same can be said for dance and choreography, that it is a team effort. There's always a moment when there's a certain instrument, there's a certain aspect of that music that needs to stand out a little bit more for the sake of balance in the entire piece. And if you have any members of the band that are amateur, they're always trying to be the ones that stand out the most. Where a professional musician is always paying attention to the person next to them, making sure that they're contributing to whoever else that they're playing with. It is honestly a group effort. So they play themselves down when other people are doing their solo, and when they stop doing their solo and it's your turn, you pick yourself up and they bring themselves down. Well, that plays into design here as well. And one of the things they're talking about in this particular aspect of the design is how they wanted to create beautiful and iconic vehicles that capture the essence of both Tokyo and San Francisco vehicles, but they needed to be boring. They had to be things that got kind of lost in the path, in the distance, that you overlooked. Because if they were drawing attention to themselves, whatever the artist and whatever that scene was about could get lost by distraction. So you had to make sure that they were creating stuff that kind of got lost into the background, but added a lot aesthetically into the design of the film. This is something that I thought was really cool as well. There's a lot to learn in this book. If you've seen my review for the book The Hobbit, which you can check out right here, one of the things that really struck me was how the costume designer would implement things into the design that informed and helped to enhance the performance of the actor, but wasn't necessarily seen on screen. For instance, King Theoden, his coat, his beautiful coat, had embroidery on the inside, handmade embroidery, this beautiful stuff, but you never see it on screen. It was just for the actor, be them method actors or just wanting to be more in character. It helped them feel more connected to their character to know that it was there. And in this particular case, they were talking about how the veranda or the terrace up on the top, to feed into the architecture of the building itself where they lived, the designers had to envision how Tadashi and Hiro, the two main characters, the two brothers, how they would get in and out of the house through the terrace if they're trying to sneak into the house. I remember at my old place, I used to be able to climb up on my balcony and open the window on the second floor window and crawl into my house that way. Kind of reminds me of that kind of stuff. Now, here's something I love. Design. Set design. That is a subject which I can't stress enough. It is incredibly informative and incredibly fun to study. There's a lot to learn about set design. This is something that I teach at length in my mentorship. I absolutely love the subject. In it, they're just layman's. I'm not going to get into the details about this, but what they're trying to describe is the differences between these two brothers. Tadashi, who's the older, more responsible brother, has a very nicely organized, clean environment, whereas Hiro is a young whippersnapper who's not so organized, and he's a little bit of a rebel, he doesn't always play by the rules, so to speak. So his room is complete chaos, where Tadashi's nice and organized. He's the responsible older brother. I love the character Tadashi. I'm not going to spoil anything. Now, if you've seen my review, I'm plugging a lot of my old videos for good reason. If you've seen my review for the art book Monster University, again, another Disney Pixar film. And in it, one of the things that I thought was really cool was how they actually mapped out the entire layout of the university itself so that they could quickly grab different layouts. You can check it out right here, by the way. I'll leave a link right here. You could very quickly capture different layouts and different camera angles by having the map laid out for you. And this is very much what they're doing over here. They were they were mapping it out so that as the artists are exploring different types of environments, they know exactly what to implement into the scene. Very helpful. When I worked on the Lord of the Rings trading card game, what really informed my artwork was knowing where these different characters were in the landscape, knowing where the mountains were, knowing the pastures that surrounded the Shire, etc. It helped to inform the backgrounds in my artwork. Now I've skipped ahead quite a bit. There's a lot. This book is huge, so of course I can't cover everything. But remember that this film takes place in a very urban location, and one of the things they had to do with the environment was simplify, dummy down, and find a way to create a more organic feeling in the environment itself. For instance, in San Fransokyo, when they had to reduce the design aesthetic so that the textures weren't too dense, well, they had to do exactly the same thing with the anatomy as well. So what they're exploring here is referencing real life for the sake of injecting this feeling of realism, that you're in a somewhat real, believable environment, but at the same time simplifying the anatomy so that it functions in this more animated world. And it illustrates something very important, the difference between realism and believability. And this is something that animators play with quite a bit, because when you're animating, very often you have to greatly simplify things. So you have to find a way to capture the most important iconic information, understand your anatomy so that you can strip it all down and keep it nice and clean like this. So they were literally referencing realism, but finding ways to simplify it. If you've read The Skillful Huntsman, which most artists have heard of if they've been involved in the art industry for longer than, 15 seconds, it's a very popular book. You know about the subject of silhouettes, readable silhouettes. It's very important when it comes to design. And what was happening here is they wanted their silhouette to reflect their personality. So before you saw colors or expressions or any of that kind of stuff, the body language, the pose, the structure of their bodies had to dictate their personality first and foremost. And you can see how this translates into this later on. And here are different explorations of how they were exploring these different things to try to capture that. Now, when it came to the design of Hiro, he was explored a lot. And what they were trying to do was, I think one of the things that was the most important in their design, that what they kind of fell on as a design mantra, an overlying design principle, was that he had to be multicultural, but also have influences from a lot of different things. Being a kid who's a bit rough around the edges, they wanted to show that he wasn't too proper in his attire, but he had to reflect American and Japanese culture in his design aesthetic, at the same time being heavily influenced, or noticeably influenced, by his older brother Tadashi, who's kind of his role model, the person who he really looked up to, and somebody who he really related to on many levels. So a lot of that plays into his particular design. Now, if you saw the art talk that I did with Emily, my daughter Emily, a week and a half ago, this is Emily. I just have to say this. If she's right now, she's just over here and she's doing her thing. She's working. She works 24 hours a day. She's always drawing. She's always busy, always in the middle of something. And despite being incredibly focused artistically, he's completely absent-minded when it comes to everything else. She would forget her head if somebody didn't say, "Emily, your head," because she invests so much of her energy into her artistry. I'm sure this is something you can relate to as well. And I love this aspect of his character because it really made me relate to him quite a bit. It's a very relatable quality. This was something about Baymax that really that I didn't realize but became completely obvious when I saw this. He's essentially designed based off of a newborn. His body structure, the kind of low shoulders, the chubby arms, so to speak, because they wanted to make him as huggable as possible. He had to feel like a lovable, huggable type of character. So a lot of effort went into designing him like that. And his eyes, I didn't realize, I thought was really cool. His eye design was based off of Japanese bells. Those bell design. Isn't that freaking cool? That's literally based off of the bell design that you can see on Japanese bells. You can see it right there. And something else. If you've seen, I'm plugging the hell out of all my books. If you've seen my review of the book Dark Souls, The Art of Dark Souls, The Design Works, one of the things that I love about Miyazaki's work was how he didn't put definitive expressions on any of his characters, even the main characters. You can never quite read the character's face. The monsters very often didn't even have faces. And the power of this is that you can project feeling onto it. He had to have a blank expression on his face, and you can anthropomorphize a blank face a lot more than a face that's delivering you a very strong performance. So in the case of Baymax, he wanted you to be able to feel like you could project cuteness on him the same way you project cuteness onto a cat. With my cat Link, you know, he'll just look at me with this blank look on his face. He says, "Are you lonely?" And he just sits there and stares at me. "Oh, you poor thing, you look miserable." His facial expression has never changed, but I love narrating cats' thoughts. And here's another clever thing when it comes to Baymax, is how he walked. And they explored a lot of different walks for him. They tried doing kind of a baby walk, but when you tried to do that, it made him look drunk. Babies walk a little bit like they're kind of stumbly and drunk because they were trying to capture the cuteness. So they actually ended up being inspired by baby penguins, a certain species of baby penguin that has this waddle walk to them. And you can see, now that you see it, now that I'm telling you, you can probably see this in the book, how they captured that and they researched penguin walks to give him that cuteness. So notice that it's not specifically a cute human, but it's something iconically cute that you subliminally pick up on, and because you love penguins and you see the cuteness in penguins, you immediately make that subconscious connection, making you feel like he's a cuter character. Now, like I said, Tadashi is definitely my favorite character. I just love his character, and it was perfectly, they describe it right here. He's described in a very, very simplistic way. He's sweet. He's a sweet, kind, loving, responsible older brother. There's just a simplicity to his character that I absolutely love. He doesn't put anything on. He's just there for his brother. He tries his best. He's just a very heartwarming character, and they captured sweetness perfectly in him. And you can see here just how they have, you know, being a good older brother, he just loves his little brother Hiro and he takes care of him. With that said, I hope you enjoyed today's overview of one of my personal favorite films of all time, Big Hero 6. So much to the point that me and Lucas have our fa-la-la-la-la-la. We still do that to this day since the movie came out. It's a touching, beautiful, and incredible, and a film that you can learn from hugely. If you research this, I strongly recommend you pick up this book, both from a design research perspective and from a quality production perspective. It just goes to show how much depth and how much beauty you can bring into a film when you put your homework into it. Take the time to know what it is that you're painting, know what it is that you're designing, and that can only benefit you in the long run. So hopefully you enjoyed today's book review. And of course, I love you all with all my heart. Stay safe and happy painting. Take care.